Hello and welcome to Rare Cuts Media Society, the podcast that looks at hidden media gems where chewing gum is the real hero. With your hosts, as always, I'm Andrew Jagoda, and with me we've got Eric Hathorn. How are you today, Eric?
I'm doing pretty good, especially because with this pick, I didn't pick it. I want to just let it be known that I didn't pick it, and it is a Disney movie. So,
Eric,
I was really
did
happy
you
with
pull
that.
some sort of
this time?
did you pull some sort of like voodoo hypnotism over here and
I had
make,
no part in
Jagoda pick
picking
it?
this.
For
the
I'm not
record,
convinced. I'm not
I was
convinced.
super excited when I heard that this is what Andrew was picking.
And of course, we've got Rob Blachik. How are you today, Rob?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Ready to talk about some Rocketeer, kicking some Nazi behind. So always good to hear talk about stuff like that.
Always up for that. And Mike Ross, how are you today, Mike?
I'm good. I just need to find myself a dog-shaped diner. That's a new goal in life.
Yeah. You're sure you don't want the van?
That's in Dumb and Dumber,
right?
Yeah. All right. Well,
next time on Rare Cuts, Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah. Dumb and Dumber. Well, as Eric alluded to, this month's pick was my pick for our continuing summer series of superheroes. And I went with the 1991 movie The Rocketeer by Walt Disney Pictures. So I'll go right into the history and get us started talking. Like many of the most popular superheroes, the Rocketeer started out as a comic book character in 1982, created by Dave Stevens. Stevens quickly decided that his character would be film-worthy and sold film rights for it in 1983, but that soon fell apart, and he ended up selling the rights again in 1985 to Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo. Their original plan was to shoot a low-budget black and white film as a complete homage to the Commando Cody serials, but that plan was soon abandoned when William Deere was brought on as a co-writer and expanded the film, including adding the Nazi Zeppelin fight at the end. So to kick us off, I thought I'd go with that and say, they made it a big budget movie. They made it explosions and everything. They went ahead, they abandoned the black and white pitch, went to color. So do you think they should have stayed with that original black and white low budget idea? Or do you think it's better that they went this way with color, big budget, big studio? I don't know, Eric, maybe since you like Disney so much, maybe want to talk about that?
Yeah, I have this thought about this one, in that if they would have given us for the time, so this is the early 90s, and I feel like this is like the big time for the blockbuster movie. We don't have that now because people stream things and it's so weird, but like back in the 80s and 90s, it was like people showed up and lined up around the street for these, the small theaters. There weren't even the big 30 screen megaplexes we have today, but they would show up, line up around the block and go see the big blockbuster summer movie. And so it's like they were shooting for the blockbuster summer movie. And I'm going to make the argument that if they made the low budget black and white movie, it might have done like indie well. I don't think it would have been a big blockbuster. And then it would have become a cult hit, which is actually kind of what happens with trying to make this a big blockbuster. Like they tried to make it a big blockbuster and it became a cult hit. So I don't think it would be any better or worse off. I think it would have stayed in the same, it would have kind of got the same fate, but at least they tried to make it a blockbuster. So that's the way I look at it, because there was the chance to make a blockbuster out of something at this time, and they swung for it and they missed, and it became a cult hit. But that's all that would have happened if they would have made the black and white movie.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely was a different time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, blockbusters were a lot different. Rob, any thoughts on that?
So I'm kind of torn a little bit between the two. So I don't know about the low budget aspect of it, because I mean, there's just so many like scientific things. I mean, the Howard Hughes, the development of the technology. I mean, the flying through the air. I mean, unless it's going to be like a stick figure flying through the air to meet the low budget. I mean, it would look terrible. But where I'm kind of split is I personally would have liked it to be a black and white film. I think it would have given it it would have definitely given it more of a sense of its time, being set in the late 30s. So I think it would. I could have seen it kind of presenting itself in a more, I don't want to say enjoyable, but kind of fitting, if you will, to the time that the film was set in. And I think it would have gave it a little bit more panache, if you will. So that's my thought. I think it would have benefited from a black and white filming instead of color.
Mm-hmm. And to round us up here, our black and white expert, Mike, you want to take a handle on that?
I don't think. I mean, if you're going to go black and white, I think you have to cut the movie time down too. I think it has to be more of an independent film festival geared mentality. So cut it down to, an hour at most. I think it could have worked. And like you've all said already, it would probably have a cult following, might even be a bigger cult following, because shorter films tend to be a little bit easier to digest, more accessible. And it probably would have gotten some awards, I would think. But overall, I think it was better to go big and go full color, full budget. I think where a lot of the problems really lie are something that we'll get into later. But specifically, the other issue that this movie had is it came out after Robin Hood, which was a huge blockbuster movie. And everyone was going to see Robin Hood, and this was just kind of there, and it was just more kid friendly.
Yeah. Definitely Robin Hood did a lot better at the box office, but
yeah.
And so did City Slickers.
Because I was just looking it up, because Robin Hood grossed $390 million.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think Kevin Costner went the right route there.
Not this year.
There's the copy of City Slickers.
Now, one thing, this is somewhat related, because we're talking about the black and white and the color and all that jazz, but I was just thinking about it. And the Rocketeer, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Rocketeer, to tie it into our superhero summer, is pretty much if you took Sky High and Rob's Batman and you put them in the blender, you kind of come out with the Rocketeer.
My mind is blown.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
I think.
Do I have a second?
Well, it's a very magic.
There's no one with true superhuman abilities in the movie.
The Batman part. It's the Batman part.
And I mean,
different parts come out of the blender. It's not all like, we're not pouring the whole thing out. We're just pouring like half the glass, So it's like you get parts of the flying in the sky high. You get the color action.
I'll give you the Batman. I'm not going to give you the sky high.
Comic book inspired moments.
So Eric, what you're saying is this is a heterogeneous mixture. Not a homogeneous mixture, but a heterogeneous. Yep. You got bits and pieces, if you will.
Exactly. Thank you for that scientific expression. It's like, to bring it back to another one of our episodes, it's like The Fly. It kind of, maybe it's not a blender, maybe it's the Fly machine. You put those two movies into the Fly transporting machine, and you might come out with the Rocketeer.
Well, the question is, which Fly?
Not the Jeff Goldblum one. Sorry, I brought us on a tangent. But if you like the sound of any of those previous episodes, go ahead and listen to those. But anyways,
Eric H., the master of the plug.
Well, to add a little flair to our black and white discussion for anybody watching the video here. Now, here's a little colorized Rocketeer for you from Funko.
Oh, yeah.
And then here's the black and white one, which
Oh,
probably doesn't
nice.
show
Mint
up
in box.
very well on my
Yeah.
screen.
That
but yeah,
that one's
black and
mint
white.
in box.
Yeah.
So-
that's
See,
the chase
that's
one.
what I'm talking about.
Just
There you
so that we have a nice base level of how to judge this against other films released the same year. What was the box office for The Rocketeer? You remember?
It was, I put it in the notes. It was what did they made 46 million off a 35 million budget.
Okay, so there's another movie. This one could be a rare cut. I would think that not many people remember it or have watched it recently. It made $63.7 million, so a little bit more. What about Bob?
Oh, that's lovely. What about Bob, if I'm not mistaken, is also Disney.
Also one of my great films of the 90s.
What about Bob
That's
was
right.
Touchstone Pictures,
What about
Walt
Bob?
Disney Motion Pictures. Yes, so it was also Disney. What
They were
about Bob?
just cranking it out. Maybe that was
Oh,
part
yeah.
of the problem.
Maybe so. The other thing, though, too, and I think we're gonna get like maybe we'll switch the conversation this way, but what about Bob is a Touchstone Disney, which is they're like, we're making this movie
Yeah.
for adults, and The Rocketeer came out under Walt Disney Pictures.
I was always excited to see that Touchstone logo come across my screen. It meant I was going to see something a little bit cooler than the kid stuff.
And as an aside from everything, but kind of tying in, so Rocketeer takes place in 1938. Dick Tracy took place in 1938 and came out a year before this movie by Touchstone Pictures. So more Disney
Yeah.
connections there for you.
Oh, for sure. Oh, I got a whole yarn to spin on that later.
Well, so Stevens, Bilson, DeMeo, and Deere started pitching the movie idea to major studios in 1986, but they were turned down a lot. Stevens says that this failure was probably due to the fact that the 1989 Batman hadn't come out and been such a huge commercial success. But eventually Disney did make them an offer based on how they thought the Rocketeer could sell toys. And their original contract called for a trilogy of films, but it also cut out all the mature stuff that they had, including Cliff's original girlfriend, Betty, was a nude model. So Disney, of course, cut that out. But they also put the film through a bunch of
But
rewrites.
they allowed some of those things in The Little Mermaid through.
Yeah, I know. They, sometimes they get it, sometimes they
Oh,
don't.
snap.
But the funny thing was that Disney put
The
it.
gauntlet has been thrown down.
Disney put the movie through a bunch of rewrites, and they kept firing and rehiring the writers. And eventually, the final cut had most of the original cuts put back in. So it was just years of going back and forth that was kind of screwing with the writers and not knowing what to do. So while Stevens and company, they weren't really free to pick and choose a studio because nobody else wanted a superhero movie at the time. Do you think Disney hurt the movie more, or should another studio have taken it? Or do you think it was in good hands with Disney? And of course, maybe I should just start back with Eric again on this one.
I was going to say, I'm going to talk for a long time, so you might want to save me for the end.
Oh, okay.
All right, Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers.
Okay.
Honestly, I feel like it needed to be edgier. I think that Disney was trying to keep it kid friendly because they felt that the only way that they were going to get people on board is, if their children can watch it too, and no one knows the Rocketeer because it's more of a niche superhero. And I think it could have done well at a different studio, take it in more of a adult vein, similar to how Batman was treated. And I wanted so badly for this to be on the same par as an Indiana Jones film. But it was like if Indiana Jones was taken from that PG-13 realm and made into PG, and it wouldn't have that nice little edge to make the film more entertaining. That's how I felt.
I am absolutely with you, Mike. I totally thought that Cliff needed to be just Cliff himself needed to be an edgier character. I mean, he's just too clean cut. Like when you look at him, I mean, I wanted to see like somebody like, even if it was like a World War I vet, I mean, set in 38, maybe someone in their 40s, right? Maybe some scars on their face. There was some big 5 o'clock shadow, right? Again, kind of, I never thought of it, but like the way you said with like an Indiana Jones type of character, even, or that kind of persona. I did not know about Cliff's girlfriend was originally being a nude model, but I think it would have worked. I mean, truthfully though, I think it would have made it more of a kind of like of an edgier character. I personally would have liked it, but then again, I mean, it's the late 80s. I mean, obviously Disney changed that. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have sat well. Maybe now, maybe they remake it and make it an edgier version. Would it work? Would it be a better film?
That's a later question.
That's a later question. We won't jump ahead.
I mean, I do feel like you guys say edgier would have been cool. I do feel like, though, if it had been a different studio, there would have been less of the nostalgic look, the Art Deco kind of look. Because like I mentioned Dick Tracy earlier, you know, anytime as a kid that I watched The Rocketeer, I felt the same way when I watched Dick Tracy, and I liked both movies as a kid. And that's very, like, I feel like Disney had that kind of feel for these. And so while its edgier look would be cool, like for me to see now, I feel like as a kid, I would have been like, no.
Yeah. What I will say to kind of support the direction that they did go in, my parents didn't let me see Dick Tracy as a kid. They did let me see The Rocketeer. I loved it as a kid.
That's the touchstone touch.
Yeah.
That's because the first Touchstone movie was Splash and there was a butt in it.
It's a butt.
Anyway,
that needs to be a soundbite for this podcast.
That's Touchstone. Okay, I do have to get into my Disney story and my theory, and it plays into a lot of what y'all just said, especially Andrew bringing up Dick Tracy and just the visual, like the look of this movie and the feel of this movie, and like that art design, direction, set design, costume design, because this is what I think happened. And I think you guys got to tell me if you could smell what I'm cooking here, to use the Rock's phrase. In 1988, Disney had Who Framed Roger Rabbit come out, and it was the biggest selling movie of the year. It takes place in the 30s, has that kind of noir kind of vibe going on. It's got that like 30s club, the piano club where the Ducks play, and it was a big smash hit for Disney. In 1989, they opened Disney's MGM Studios, now Hollywood Studios, which took a lot of that 30s style design and Roger Rabbit and incorporated it into the park. We have a synergy moment. I have to talk about that because that's what I love to talk about. So we have that happening right around the same time. Disney feels like they are in the I'm going to use Michael Eisner because he's my favorite, but he feels with Disney like the 30s is the place to be, and he feels so like vindicated by the fact that the next year in 1989 Batman comes out, which does have a 30s flair to it. It does have that Art Deco feel. And the other big movie that comes out, one of the other big movies that comes out in 89 is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is also taking place in that same time period. You've got your Nazis in 30s in Germany and all that stuff going on too.
So if you take those and put them in a blender, then you get
So Disney was kind of trying to ride that wave, but after 1989, I think the wave started to kind of come down, and Dick Tracy is a mess. The movie Dick Tracy is a mess. I love Dick Tracy as a movie, but Warren Beatty got too much. They gave him too much go ahead with Dick Tracy, and they spent more money on it than they should have. And I think Dick Tracy killed the 30s wave that was happening in cinema. And if The Rocketeer had come out the year Dick Tracy did instead of Dick Tracy, I think it would have done better. Because if you look at, you brought up, you bring up the Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which has that famous, the famous song in that was the Bryan Adams, Everything I Do It For You. Awesome song. But if you look at what Disney brings out like the next year after that, or a couple years after that, they brought out the Three Musketeers, and that had a big pop song with it had the three singers. It was like Sting, Rod Stewart.
Oh yeah.
And who was the other one in that one? Sting, Rod Stewart. It's gonna drive me crazy.
All for one or all for love, or
and
something.
Bryan Adams. Oh, it was Bryan Adams. He was
Bryan
back
Adams.
for it. They got Bryan Adams, but they're like, forget just Bryan Adams. We're bringing Rod Stewart and Sting into the mix because we got the Three Musketeers. And it almost seems to me like that movie with that pop music move was I'm coming for Robin Hood because this is the new genre. This is where people are going. And I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it bigger. I think that was a Michael Eisner move, because that movie in his mind killed his 30s genre that he built the whole park around. So he's going to do it bigger. Came for them with Three Musketeers.
He killed Jim Henson.
He did not. He did want the Muppets. Oh my goodness. I will not stand for that being in this here. No. Oh, it'll stay in the podcast audio and video, but I will not stand for it without me saying that.
Well, you're sitting for it. So.
That's true. But yeah, no, that's kind of my I think they were riding that 30s wave, and this one, if you would have switched the order of those two movies, this one might have done better.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if Rocketeer had come out before Robin Hood, I think that it would have done much better. I feel, let's say that Robin Hood came out in 92. I think Rocketeer easily becomes a box office hit during that time frame. But unfortunately became kind of white noise. I love the Rocketeer though when it came out. I mean, I thought it was awesome. I played the video games, which don't play the video games, maybe. But I think I even had because they only had a couple toys, and I think I even had a Rocketeer toy when I was a kid. I thought that helmet was awesome. I wanted, it's funny because at the end of the movie, they show children running around pretending to be the Rocketeer, like they're playing. And I remember playing that by myself around my backyard. So.
Yeah, I remember that we had bought a box of cereal that in the back of the front of the box was, you cut it out so that you had a Rocketeer helmet. So if you looked inside, you're like, oh, it's the Rocketeer. And that's cool. Yeah, that was the closest we got to Rocketeer toys.
That's neat. I will say, though, you don't have to, I'm going to go back to it. You don't have to just reminisce about the Rocketeer because he still exists in the Disney parks. And if you go to that 30s park, I'm just going to use it. There's even more Easter eggs to the Rocketeer around. There is a frozen Coke stand called Peevy's Frozen Concoctions, and it is themed to the Rocketeer, and his jetpack is there. His helmet's still there. There's a blueprint somewhere back there if the you can see of the thing, and it's that character Peevy as as a like his little stand. There's like a really kind of industrial looking Rocketeer invention-y style stuff behind it in there, and it's right in the Echo Lake area of Disney's Hollywood Studios. It's still there. There's also some other like just little, you'll see like little mentions of it in like Easter eggs and stuff throughout that park. Still there though.
I'm just gonna say it. This episode's become a little too Disney-fied for everything.
You brought it out, and I have to do it.
I know.
But you could go see it in Florida. Go for it.
All right. Well, let's move on with our discussion here and say,
you know what? I have to interrupt one last time. We need more Rocketeer in Florida so he can go beat up the Nazis because they're down there. I said it.
There you go. That's definitely staying in.
Anyway, so director Joe Johnston, a former ILM Lucasfilm employee, helped convince Disney to use Billy Campbell instead of a bigger name. That, of course, the execs wanted somebody huge, and of course they did. But along those lines, originally for the part of Peevy, instead of Alan Arkin, they wanted Lloyd Bridges. Kind of a weird one. Neville Sinclair was originally offered to Jeremy Irons. Eddie Valentine was written for Joe Pesci, but he declined. So with those differences of opinion on casting, I thought I'd ask, what are your thoughts on the casting that they did in this movie? Anybody that you thought was just awful? Anybody you really liked? Pleasant surprise? Anything like that?
Perfect. I thought it was perfect. I have no problem with their casting. I prefer the Rocketeer to be someone that I don't find very recognizable or familiar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you throw someone like a Brad Pitt or someone else in there, you're just going to be watching like, that's Brad Pitt. So I preferred this casting. I thought everyone was cast very well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I agree. The one character that I liked Alan Arkin as Peevy. I don't know. I just thought he fit the character well. I was just most pleasantly surprised there. I did not look at the casting before I watched it, so I was a little surprised to see one John Locke as Howard Hughes. I mean, Terry O'Quinn, excuse me.
Yeah.
So I was like, wait a second, who is that? Because he looks the same back in the late 80s as he did
just
in the
with a mustache.
Just basically the same. He didn't age apparently at all. But despite my comments about Billy Mitchell as Cliff or the Rocketeer before, I do think for the scope of the film and how they set it up, I thought it was well cast. I agree with you, Mike.
And Alan Arkin, he's kind of familiar with the Touchstone brand and Disney too. So, because like in Edward Scissorhands, like anytime I see Alan Arkin, I'm just like, he's the dad in Edward Scissorhands that's trying to give Edward some lemonade.
Yikes.
Bring on the booze.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it was a very well cast movie. Everything was good. I do have to throw a couple of things out there, some revelations from watching this movie from the casting. The first thing is, so I know like I have embraced a love of James Bond. And I know, Andrew, we have done a lot of James Bond, and I have never been the biggest fan of the Timothy Dalton James Bonds. And I think it's because of the Rocketeer. Because in the back of my mind, he's a villain. So when I watch those, I associate, because I saw this movie well before I saw any of those Bond films. And it's like, I see him and I'm like, there's something I don't like about this guy. Like, there's just something. And maybe it's because I think that he's Neville Sinclair.
He's also a Nazi.
In Hot Fuzz, he plays the evil murderer, head of the cult. And anytime I see his face, like I see that movie specifically, like where he's just like smiling at what's his name, Sean Penn, not Sean Penn. What's his name?
Simon Pegg,
Simon Pegg. Yes.
SP.
And he's just like running alongside him, and he's like, "You got to catch me. I'm the slasher." And looks at him, and he's like, "The slasher of prices." So anytime I see that face,
I will say though, he is great in this part.
oh, he's perfect.
Oh,
which is why
no one else could have pulled it off as well.
He does, because he does have that like heroic, like the James Bond swagger when he's playing like the actor version of Neville Sinclair, and then when he's the Nazi, you're like, dang. And he's a great actor.
Mhm.
He's a great actor. But yeah, him as Bond always kind of bothered me. And I think this time watching The Rocketeer, I was like, that's what it is. This is ingrained in me from a young age. And I just see him and I'm like, maybe when is he going to turn into the bad guy? Because that's what he did. But he's also what's it, Prickle Pants, the porcupine in Toy Story. But that's the Disney thing that just happens with me sometimes. But no, the other casting thing that was amazing. I was sitting there watching it on the computer, and they go to the South Seas Club, and it's been a long while since I've watched this one. I watched it a bunch when I was younger. I hadn't watched it in a number of years. And the singer is Jan from The Office, Melora Hardin.
Mhm.
And I paused the video and I turned it to Carrie, my wife, and I said, look, it's Jan from The Office. And she goes, oh yeah, she's basically playing the same character she played in Threat Level Midnight. And I go, oh my God, was Threat Level Midnight, her being the lounge singer with like Michael Scott in his tux, was that a nod to The Rocketeer? So I just had to throw that out there, that there might have been a nod to The Rocketeer in Threat Level Midnight, because it's basically the same character.
Yeah, like you guys said, I think casting wise, they did the right thing. You know, Joe Johnston was right. Don't use a real big name. Now, the funny thing is that you mentioned Timothy Dalton. So the movie didn't do so well compared to what they expected. So then to boost sales overseas, they changed the overseas posters to prominently feature Timothy Dalton because of the James Bond connection. So instead of being the Art Deco, like, just the Rocketeer flying, they did like one of those pictures where it's like, oh, here's the hero, here's the villain, here's, her with all the faces. And they made Timothy Dalton prominent so that people would go, it's Bond.
Gotcha.
But yeah, like you were saying, Timothy Dalton, I mean, if it had been, because I don't know who else was up for awards that year, but he should have been up for some awards for this because of the fact that he's an actor playing an actor that plays good guys, but he's also playing a Nazi spy that's, I mean, it's like a very meta kind of thing. It's all these levels, and he did it very well.
Oh yeah.
For a movie that they probably just said to him, you're the bad guy. Just, they probably didn't give him a lot of direction for that. So I really liked him in that. And of course, like you said, Alan Arkin. I mean, imagine Lloyd Bridges trying to do that. Would have been terrible. No offense to Lloyd Bridges fans. But I do also want to mention Tiny Ron Taylor played Luthor. And, considering how much prosthetics he had to have for that.
It was everything they had left over from Dick Tracy. No.
Exactly. That's one of the things that made me think Dick Tracy the whole time I watched it as a kid. But for having to wear all those prosthetics and being 7 feet tall, props to him. I mean, he's not with us anymore, but props to him for going through that and not being recognized for any of his work. So having gone through great casting, I mean, the plan was originally for a trilogy, but with, like we said earlier, they only earned $46 million with a $35 million budget, and they threw a lot of promotion. So really they didn't probably make anything. Disney quickly canceled that plan, pulled all the toy licenses except for a couple. There's there were a couple out there. I think they were like the stretchy pole kind of toys,
bendy toys.
Stretch
bendy
Armstrong
toys.
style.
Yeah, like that style. But for Disney to cancel a toy line, I mean, that's pretty rare for us now. So of course they've been talking remakes. It's been floated around a number of times, but so far Disney only went as far as doing a Disney Junior animated series about Cliff's great granddaughter, who somehow finds the pack that was destroyed in the movie. But I never watched the show, so I won't judge.
Oh, you've already judged.
That little girl shouldn't have that. I quit.
It was on the back of yeah, he found it on Neville's back, the bone skeleton. She just pulled off. Still good.
So as we do here on Rare Cuts Media Society, remakes, revamps, whatever, sequel, you know the drill. What would we do? Where would Willem Dafoe go?
Defoe go.
Defogo.
Defoe
like a
go.
restaurant.
Defoe go.
Sounds
Defoe
like
go
a
to
restaurant.
Cho.
Defoe go
Can
to
we
show.
go there?
No.
No.
Personally, I think if Willem Dafoe were in a version of the Rocketeer, he wouldn't play Neville Sinclair.
No.
He would play Lothar.
Probably.
No.
Yes.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yes.
I'm going to agree with Andrew.
He would be
That's
the
where I was
killer.
going to put him.
Yeah,
I
he would
have
be
him
the-
as
He would be
Peevy.
the killer. You
I have him as Peevy. He would be a great Peevy.
He would
I-
be a PV. I wouldn't say he'd be a great PV.
Personally, I would take Disney's original suggestion, but switch him and have Jeremy Irons be Peevy. He made a good Alfred.
But he
What's
was
your
also
choice?
Scar.
What do you think? Rob, who's your Peevy?
Peevy. You know what? It's funny you think, because I didn't think about Willem Dafoe as Peevy.
It could still
but he
be Alan
kinda-
Arkin.
No, I think he would be a good Peevy because he kind of could play a similar character like in Poor Things, because he's like the
Yeah.
mad scientist kind of. He's alongside the leads. I think he would fit in well. No, I didn't think of that. Yeah, I could see him fitting there. You kind of think, all right, he'd be Neville, but I think he would be a good PV. Alan Arkin was great though. No, nothing against Alan Arkin. He was great in the film.
Yeah, I think the reason I go toward Jeremy Irons is I feel like because of Alan Arkin's acting ability in the original, it's like I want to go to somebody that's like a serious actor for that part because he just really nailed it. But for Cliff, I would say you could do Tom Holland, and I'll say why. Now, nothing against Billy Campbell. The man's big. He's tall. He's strong. Pilots back then were usually smaller guys because they could fit in the cockpit. And I feel like Tom Holland would make more sense in that regard.
So like jockeys, basically.
Yeah. I mean, not super short, but like you don't want a guy that can't get in and out of the pilot seat.
Hollywood would put Chris Pratt. Because he's
see,
every action hero. He's just every action hero. So Hollywood would be like, we need someone to be the Rocketeer. Chris Pratt's available. So of course. He's just he's every action hero.
So I wrote it so I didn't think of this until we started talking. I can't remember what triggered it, but I just was scratching notes down. Now, obviously it wouldn't be today because of his health concerns. But if they made this more of a darker film, I would almost think, could this be like a Sin City version of the Rocketeer and Bruce Willis playing Cliff? Because to a certain extent, it's kind of similar. Hardigan is trying to get back Nancy, who's been kidnapped. Cliff trying to get back Jenny, who's been kidnapped. And it would definitely, that kind of whole like more gruff character, obviously that's Bruce Willis. But that I don't know what triggered it, but I was like, wait a second, that would be perfect if they made a dark version, kind of make it like a Sin City. I think it would work. I think it would work.
Yeah, with that kind of real contrast graphic style.
Yeah. Even the black and white.
Yeah.
I mean, that again,
I think that could
that.
work. Yeah.
Obviously, much darker than the Disney version.
I think if I went dark like that, maybe we wouldn't do Willem Dafoe as Lothar. We'd do David Harbour from Stranger Things.
That's a good
I think
one.
he'd be good in that if it was like the darker kind of look.
This is again another plug for Violet Night in case you haven't seen it.
Only the fourth time he's done that in an episode here.
I went in a completely different direction. I went kind of thinking of this more, and maybe we could do it in a modern setting. And you could cast people into different like gender roles and stuff. And I thought it would be fun to see. And I even used some Disney people.
That's good.
But I think that, and we could change the names around. But for the role of the Cliff character, I would see Halle Bailey. She could take on kind of that role of the Rocketeer. Timothy Chalamet could be her Jenny.
Okay.
I love it.
Willem Dafoe, Peevy. For Neville Sinclair, I did Angelina Jolie as the main villain. For Howard Hughes, I cast someone who has experience as Howard Hughes and did Leonardo DiCaprio.
Reprising his role.
If we have no concerns over budgetary constraints.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's true.
And for Lothar, I went with Ron Perlman.
I can see that.
That's a good one.
I can see that.
Or Mickey Rourke.
Oh, he could do that too.
He's
He'd be good for that.
He's scary.
So I thought of Neville Sinclair as more like either Chris Hemsworth or Idris Elba.
Ooh.
I feel like those two would be very good at portraying that like levels, especially Idris Elba would be real good at portraying the levels of that character.
Or you just throw in Pierce Brosnan with a mustache.
Just because he replaced Bond. No. No. Oh, man. I have a different... So I don't have as many actors. Like I'm throwing out my cheap ones. Like I would put, if I'm going to put Willem Dafoe anywhere, I put him as Lothar. If I'm going to do... I said... Chris Pratt, of course. But my remake thing is actually something that I'm going to make it about Disney again. Something that I and probably so many other Disney Parks fans would love and hope that happens. So I got to spin another yarn here about Disney. So at first I told you that the Rocketeer has like nods in the parks. In the Imagineering, everyone making the parks what they are, with these rides and experiences, there has developed something over the years called the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. And it wasn't really like a big public out there like thing. It was just kind of like Imagineering was putting these little nods out there that the Society of Explorers and Adventurers exists. And it runs in the background of like all of these rides and experiences and restaurants and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of these nods to other people being in the Society of Explorers and Adventurers if you're like around the park. So for instance, like the Jungle Cruise is like embedded into the Society of Explorers and Adventurers lore. The Trader Sam's tiki bars in Florida and California are embedded into this world. And the idea is there's like, for instance, the Tower of Terror overseas in Tokyo is the it's got Harrison Hightower.
3 hours later.
Society of Explorers and Adventurers. Well, another person who is in the Society of Explorers and Adventurers is Jock Lindsay from the pilot from Indiana Jones, and he's got a bar at Disney Springs, and in that bar it is full of Easter eggs that are like South Seas Club things and the Flying Circus, and there's all these things in that bar that nod to the Rocketeer. In the Trader Sam's bars, there's things about the South Seas Club. There's like a menu in one of them. So like these are all in there, which kind of puts the Rocketeer in place to be part of the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. So what you do is you take the Jungle Cruise movie, which also takes place in the same time frame, and you start weaving this multiverse that goes through all this Disney history of all these attractions like the Jungle Cruise and the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, and you make like a secret Society of Explorers and Adventurers movie, like multiverse. And the remake of the Rocketeer fits into that and like nods to the Jungle Cruise, but also pulls in some in-park IP stuff. And you bring it in that way, in the same way that comic books do that. And they'll like pull this character and then have a meet up with this kid. And you just kind of make this world that's like behind the Disney park stuff, but you do those movies that incorporate. That's what I want.
Well, from what I've heard,
with the yarn there,
it sounded like
I forget. I'm wondering, was this my episode or your episode?
You planned it this way. No, you made it this way.
Hypnotized. I'm telling you, there's something to it.
I had heard that someone was trying to push something, not exactly what you're saying, but they were pushing for the Rocketeer to somehow merge into the Marvel universe and team up with like Agent Carter and Captain America. And Kevin Feige was like, no. And then it just
Kevin
went away.
Feige knows the Rocketeer does not belong to Marvel. It belongs to the Society of Explorers and Adventurers. And that's, you know what? Honestly, if they would just do a Society of Explorers and Adventurers comic book series that was done in like the old 30s, like pulpy kind of way. And like maybe each comic book has like 3 stories in it. And one of them's from this character. One of them's from that one. This one takes place in a haunted mansion. Whatever you want to do, I'd love it. I eat it up. They did like a Disney Kingdoms thing. I don't know, more than a few years back now. And I love those comic books. They were based on Disney rides, but like, let's get a Society of Explorers and Adventurers, SEA, the C thing going here. That's what I want. And the Rocketeer does not belong in Marvel. Don't put him there.
No. I mean, it would be a cool idea to see Captain America and what they would do together, but not.
He would
not
basically just
movies.
be Captain America's launching pad. Like you would launch up with them, and he'd be like, "Okay, now I'm going to throw you down at that group of Nazis. Go take them out." And superhero landing.
Which is not that dissimilar to Sky High and how Jetstream and the what was his name? And I can't remember it. How the captain? No, it wasn't the captain.
Commander.
The commander. Yes. It's not dissimilar to how the Commander and Jetstream traveled in Sky High. That's how they did it. So I'm going.
Rob wants to see a sequel
to Sky High, or
no. And then the Fly came in,
and that's how they fly.
And that is how Disney created the Marvel Universe.
And that is how Disney created Rare Cuts Media Society.
I wish Disney created us, because then that would make us a product of them. Also, we'd be cashing them sweet checks.
Actually, they would just think that we're just, interns that we're doing it for exposure dollars.
True.
They get the luxury of speaking about our brand and IP.
Although today We had the luxury of speaking about theirs. We so did.
Never picking a Disney movie again.
No, you have to, because then I just revel in it. Because I love it. I love it.
I'm
We should
making sure my
only
next
pick
film
Disney
is
movies.
not a Disney film.
There's a lot of sneaker Disney films. So be like, what about Bob? Y'all talk about What About Bob? I was like, that's a Disney. 100%.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
I have to pick all the
By
like
accident.
Sylvester Stallone movies now, Rob.
I'm now going to try to find a Stallone movie that has some sort of connection to Disney, just so I can have y'all pick that.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
I mean, you're
true.
right. There you go.
He's in it.
There you go.
Done.
Done. Not very rare cut though.
No, super common.
So that was the Rocketeer. That was our third installment of our superhero summer. And, so we had the Rocketeer. Last month we did Sky High with a whole group of high school superheroes and sidekicks. And we started the series with the Batman serial. From what year was that, Rob?
41?
Okay.
40? I think so.
Watch the episode and you'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
I just flung my pencil.
It's in the documentation somewhere.
So so we started there and we got to watch these Batman serials that aired in theaters weekly. It's very interesting. It's a type of media that we really haven't really kind of taken place in our lifetime, and so it's kind of new and different. So to kind of balance out this superhero summer, we have to go with Batman's arch rival, and that is Superman. You disagree? That's not Batman's arch rival?
I mean, they're both on the Justice League.
But they're rivals.
I guess I would. Yeah, are they? What's the deal between like rivals, enemies, and nemesis?
It sounds like an episode all in itself.
There was a thing one time when they talked about, I think it was on This American Life, when they talked about nemesis and like how a nemesis is someone who you like follow their story. You're like constantly in competition with them. But nemesis sounds more negative.
Yeah, it does. I like rival because they're both good. They both have similar morals to some effect. And Batman doesn't trust Superman, and Superman doesn't really trust Batman, even though they should be best friends. They're kind of rivals. There's a rivalry.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Rivalry. I'll give you that. I like
so,
it.
But to also keep with that theme of something a little bit different, because Superman's not rare. But what we're going to take a look at, I think, is rare, and that is The Adventures of Superman radio serial from 1940. So we're going to be taking a listen, and I think if you have time, you should take a listen too. And we will have ourselves a little discussion, because Superman's story of origin is not always the same. So next time on Rare Cuts, Eric, where can people find these lovely episodes?
So let me know if I don't catch one. But they are there's some out there on YouTube that I know you can listen to with kind of a static imagey thing going on. But then there, from what I could tell, there have been some releases here and there over the years. To check your library to see if they have them. But it is definitely a rare cut. So the easiest way would probably be those YouTube videos. So yeah, go take a listen to Superman, the radio serial, not the breakfast cereal. Although if we did have a Superman breakfast cereal, that would be delicious. So go listen to the radio serial of Superman, and then meet us next time on the Rare Cuts Media Society. Visit us online at rarecutsmediasociety.com. There you can find old episodes, subscribe, or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.